What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode. Man, weather is starting to slowly get warmer here in the first few weeks of March. Still a little chilly. I guess now it's 70, but when I left the house it was 65. I guess in this video I was gonna consider just making a video about like what it's like living in Arizona. For almost about a year and a half now I've been here. I can say there's definitely some challenges. Lifestyle is slightly different, as far as like the workplace out here, housing, just the whole economy itself. I mean, especially here in Kingman, obviously it's going to be a lot different than say like Phoenix or Tucson, where it's a lot bigger cities. That Kingman is like, it's a smaller town. I want to say last time I looked, this town had about, I want to say 27,000 population, and then the city, Bullhead, it's got about, I think about like close to 60,000, so it's almost twice the size as this. As you can tell, it's a lot of open land, and I would say the majority demographic that lives here is like 40 and up. There is high schools out here, there are kids out here, but as far as like teenagers, they're mostly like still in high school kind of stuff. And I mean, and the young people that are out here, they're like generally my age, are working and all that stuff. So it's not like a huge like young person town. So like demographic is definitely the older generation. That's kind of the downfall of this place, is that just there's so many like older people. And this town, because it's not as big, that there's a lot of trailer parks, like not trailer parks, but trailer homes, single wide and maybe double wide, especially in the neighborhood that I live in. Over the last year and a half that I've been here, they have definitely like been adding in more houses and like kind of getting rid of a lot of the trailers. So like the street behind me, they've added like 3 or 4 houses. On my street, they've added 2 houses. And then streets just like in my neighborhood, they've added like 2 or 3 houses here and there. So it's progressively changing and getting rid of going away from a lot of the trailer parks or trailer homes. And so I mean, it's growing, and I'd say like from what I was told, this town, it doesn't grow very fast. It like maybe does, if we're lucky, like 5 new buildings in a year. So I don't really know like the growing rate of the city. I mean, it's a nice small town. You definitely have like your normal kind of ghetto areas, a lot nicer areas, and like the middle class areas. And so I guess it just kind of depends on where in this town you're living. But overall, I mean, I don't hate it. Like, I prefer living out here just in Arizona in general, just because, like you said, you have like 90 to 95% of the year is like nice weather, nice warm weather. And then you have, anywhere from 2 to 3 months of kind of like coldish weather. Like, we're still kind of in that era of cold weather. So like I'd say like the beginning of the year, like January to the end of March is kind of like the colder season, where the mornings it's about like 40 degrees, and then the midday is about 60, anywhere from 60 to 70, and then later in the night it gets back down to like fucking 30 or 40. But other than that, we rarely get snow out here. And last year, in March last year, we actually did get like a decent amount of snow, but it really is only here for not even a full day. It definitely like snowed and then melted within the same day. So the snow does not really stick or really like last very long out here. So that's kind of like one of the main reasons why I like living out here, is the fact that there's warm weather majority of the year versus in Washington, where you got a lot of kind of gloomy, cold, rainy days and very few warm days. So it's a nice transition to like a opposite, I guess you can say, weather. The downfall of living out here, I'd say, is definitely the job market out here is kind of horrible. There are companies hiring, but as far as like job wise, a lot of companies, like, because Arizona is a right to work state, if you want to work, you can get a job, but because of that, they have low starting wages out here. And they, compared to Seattle, you know, starting wage in Seattle, depending on, I guess, what kind of job you're going for, is roughly about $15 an hour for minimum wage. Minimum wage out here is like 13 something. And with my experience of majority warehouse and automotive, being in the warehouse industry for 13 years, you know, I'd say I would probably be making, you know, about 25 an hour with my experience. But out here, the job market for warehouse jobs, like, you're starting off 15, 16, if you're lucky 17, and then obviously with my job, I was gonna work first shift, which would have been 17, but I'm like, I can't do that. I thought I was gonna try to negotiate my pay because I have experience, but a lot of companies out here don't care about your experience. Because it's a right to work state, they'll pay you whatever their starting wage is gonna be, and that's what sucks about having experience. It's like, they don't care. You can have 40 years in a certain field, and you go, you know, depending on the position, I guess you can say, if you're a manager, it might be different, or, you know, a supervisor or whatever, that might be different pay scale. But, you know, because I wasn't really like in the management position in a lot of my warehouse jobs, per se, you know, so I would be applying just for like a normal warehouse worker, which, you know, they're not going to pay me for my experience of being in the field for 13 years. So that's kind of the downfall of it. So, I mean, if you don't have any debt and you live with somebody, you should relatively be fine, like, moving here. And pay wise, you know, like, if you're making, let's say, at least 16 an hour and you have no debt, you know, and very little bills, you can survive out here, like, living with roommates. Living on your own out here, that's another question. You know, it's by yourself, it's not going to be easy, unless you're making upwards of 50,000, and you're not going to get that kind of job starting out here. Like, from when I looked up I don't want to say not the annual salary, but the majority of the income of people out here is about 38,000, which is not great, but it's not like horrible. It's doable in the right circumstances. But yeah, like, the major reason I moved here was the nice weather and cheaper housing. You know, you can buy a house here for wicked cheap compared to Seattle, you know. So Seattle, if you want, I say north part, like northern of Seattle, not actually Seattle area, but the area I lived in Washington, if you want a decent house, you're gonna have to be spending $400,000 at the bare minimum. $400,000. If it's like a rundown house, kind of crappy, you'll be lucky. I mean, if you can get, you know, 200, maybe 1,000. But out here, you can have a brand new house built for 200,000. Anywhere from 200 to 250, a brand new house, and a decent size as it is. And so that's why I wanted to come out here, you know, for the nice weather, be able to afford a nice house. But I mean, how could you not like this view of being like not being in a big city, and you're not like crowded with tons of traffic and apartments and all that stuff. And you know, even when I first moved here, they don't really advertise for apartments all that much, which I'm kind of surprised. So I'd say like out of 10, 1 being the worst place to live, 10 being the greatest place to live. I mean, I'd probably give it like a good 6. But I do enjoy the view and the fact that there's not a lot of traffic. The only times there's really traffic is like in the morning when people are on their way to work, just like a normal town, but it's not ungodly. So, you know, having all the desert instead of the trees, it's definitely a different kind of environment. It takes a little bit to get used to, and then the one thing that's not the greatest is the summers. I mean, the summers get about 120 degrees, depending on what area you're in. Like Bullhead, it does reach about 120, and Kingman is about 10 degrees cooler, so it's not as bad, but it is pretty warm, and so it's not always that hot. It's only mostly in the summertime. Other than that, other times of the year, it's pretty tolerable. You know, which I like the pretty much before summer and after summer is where it's the best, where it's still anywhere from 70 to 90 degrees.